somewhere beyond the last quiet station, where the silver rails disappear into moonlit forests, there is a place where time does not move forward or backward. It simply waits, hidden among ancient trees. Beyond winding lantern paths stands a beautiful museum, unlike any ever built. No crowds gather there. No guides call visitors from room to room. No velvet ropes separate the past from the present, because every evening preserved inside its quiet halls still belongs to someone. A child's final summer sunset, a father's peaceful walk home beneath autumn leaves, the warm laughter shared around a tiny kitchen table, the last evening two old friends watched the stars together. None of them were forgotten, only carefully kept, until the hearts that needed them were ready to remember once more. Tonight, Elias follows another quiet doorway deep within the hidden library, where forgotten evenings wait beneath soft golden light, and every room gently reminds its visitors that the smallest moments of life are often the ones that quietly shape who we become. Welcome to *** Sleep with Stories ***, where every journey is designed to quiet the mind, soften the heart, and gently carry you toward peaceful sleep. If these quiet journeys become a peaceful part of your evenings, your gentle support through a like or subscription quietly helps this library continue welcoming travelers from around the world. Thank you for helping these stories continue to grow. So make yourself comfortable. Allow your breathing to slow. Leave today's worries where they belong. And when you're ready, let us quietly step inside ***, the Museum of Forgotten Evenings. ***, not every museum is built to preserve history. Some are built to preserve feelings. Elias stood quietly before the great wooden doors, their weathered oak surface glowing softly beneath the warm light of hanging lanterns. Unlike every doorway he had crossed within the hidden library, these doors held no title, no carved inscription, no symbol explaining what waited beyond. Only thousands of tiny brass stars, carefully embedded across the wood, each polished by countless unseen hands, through ages almost forgotten. The stars shimmered gently whenever the lantern light touched them, like distant memories, patiently waiting for someone willing to look up once again. His blossom lantern glowed with its familiar comforting warmth beside him. Yet tonight, its quiet light seemed almost shy, as though even it understood. This place protected something unusually precious. Elias rested one hand upon the cool brass handle before he could gently open the door. He noticed something unexpected. Resting upon the stone step sat a young woman, She appeared no older than 21. Her chestnut hair flowed softly across the shoulders of a long, deep blue traveling cloak lined with pale silver stitching. A small leather satchel rested beside her feet. She wasn't reading. She wasn't sleeping. She simply watched the lanterns sway peacefully above the entrance, as though she had been listening to their quiet conversation for a very long time. When she finally noticed Elias, she offered the smallest smile, not the smile of someone greeting a stranger, but the gentle smile of someone quietly relieved that another traveler had finally arrived. The young woman slowly rose from the stone step, carefully brushing a few golden leaves from the edge of her cloak. For a quiet moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them never felt awkward. It felt familiar, like two travelers pausing beneath the same evening sky after walking different roads. "My name is Alara." Her voice was soft, clear, and carried the peaceful warmth of someone who had learned long ago that gentle words always traveled farther than loud ones. "Elias," he offered the same calm smile. "I've been waiting." Elias blinked gently. "You knew I was coming." Alara looked toward the enormous museum doors. A lantern above them swayed quietly in the evening breeze. "No, I only knew someone would eventually arrive." She rested one hand upon her satchel. The museum has a curious habit. It welcomes people only after they've collected enough evenings worth remembering. The words settled quietly between them. Elias found himself thinking back over the roads that had already carried him here. The hidden library, the clockmaker's wing, the river of floating lanterns, the garden of forgotten dreams, the house where every window glowed, the conservatory of whispering rain, the orchard of golden moons, the observatory above the clouds, the tea house between seasons, the mapmaker's hall, the valley of silent bells, the bridge of blooming lanterns, the meadow where starlight rested, and finally, the peaceful station for sleeping travelers. Each destination had offered him something small, a lesson, a keepsake, a quiet understanding. None had seemed extraordinary while they happened, yet together they had slowly changed the traveler he had become, almost as though reading the same thought. Elias smiled. The museum doesn't collect perfect evenings. It treasures the ordinary ones, because those are usually the evenings people forget first. Elias looked once more toward the great wooden doors. The tiny brass stars, embedded across their ancient surface, shimmered gently beneath the lantern light. For just an instant, he almost believed one of them quietly brightened, as though the museum itself had heard the conversation Elara stepped slowly toward the great wooden doors. She did not reach for the handle. Instead, she simply rested her fingertips upon the weathered oak. For several quiet heartbeats, nothing happened then, almost too gently to notice. One tiny brass star, embedded within the ancient wood, began to glow. Another followed, then another. One by one, hundreds of tiny stars awakened across the great doors, not with dazzling brilliance, but with the soft warmth of evenings remembered with gratitude. The museum had not been unlocked. It had simply recognized its visitors. Without a single sound, the enormous doors slowly opened inward. Warm amber light spilled quietly across the stone path. It did not rush forward. It welcomed. Elias looked beyond the entrance. No grand marble hall waited inside. No towering statues. No endless corridors stretching into darkness. Instead, the museum felt wonderfully familiar. Comfortable wooden floors, soft candlelight dancing across polished shelves, beautiful paintings framed in warm oak, gentle music floating, almost unnoticed through the air. And everywhere, small moments, a family quietly sharing bread beneath a summer sky, an old fisherman smiling as he repaired a child's tiny wooden boat, two sisters laughing together beneath autumn leaves, a young traveler watching snow fall outside a little window, while a kettle slowly began to sing. Nothing extraordinary, nothing famous, only evenings, beautiful, ordinary evenings. Elias found himself whispering, "They're so small." Elara smiled. The evenings themselves always are. They only become extraordinary after enough years have quietly passed. Together, they stepped inside. Behind them, the great wooden doors closed once more, with barely a whisper. The outside world disappeared. Only the quiet glow of forgotten evenings remained. The first gallery welcomed them without a single sign. No polished plaque introduced the room. No carefully written description explained what its visitors were about to witness. Only a single lantern rested quietly above the entrance. Its warm light gently revealed 3 simple words carved into old cedar wood. Asterisk, asterisk, the first evenings. Asterisk, asterisk, Elara paused before stepping inside. "I think this is everyone's favorite gallery." Elias smiled. "Because it's the beginning." She nodded. "And because beginnings are usually much smaller than we remember." The room itself was breathtaking in its simplicity. Instead of paintings hanging upon walls, beautiful evenings floated quietly within hundreds of crystal frames, suspended gently in the air. Each frame held no larger than an ordinary window. Each glowed with its own peaceful light. Some shimmered with golden sunsets. Others reflected gentle snowfall. Some carried warm summer evenings, while others rested beneath quiet spring rain. None demanded attention. Each simply waited, patiently, for anyone willing to stop. Elias slowly approached the nearest frame. Inside, a little girl sat beside her grandmother beneath the porch of a tiny countryside home. Together they watched fireflies appear one by one above the evening grass. Neither of them spoke. The grandmother simply reached across the old wooden bench, took the child's small hand, and gently squeezed it. The memory ended there. No great farewell, no remarkable discovery, no miracle, only a single squeeze of the hand. Elias remained standing quietly before the frame. "That's all." Elias smiled. "Yes, it doesn't seem important." It didn't, until many years later. She looked once more toward the glowing memory. The little girl returned to that porch after her grandmother had gone. The fireflies still came. The summer breeze still carried the scent of lavender. But no one reached for her hand. Only then did she finally understand that one ordinary evening had quietly become one of the greatest treasures of her life. Elias looked back toward the crystal frame. The little girl still smiled, completely unaware that the simplest moment of her childhood would one day become something priceless. They continued walking. The second frame revealed an elderly man carefully teaching his grandson how to fold a tiny paper boat beside a peaceful stream. The third showed two sisters sharing the final slice of fresh bread. While pretending not to notice, they were both still hungry. Another preserved nothing more than a young couple quietly watching rain gather upon a window. No conversation, no dramatic embrace, only two steaming cups of tea, and the comforting knowledge that neither of them needed words that evening. Every memory felt astonishingly ordinary, yet everyone carried a warmth impossible to ignore. Elias finally asked, "Who chooses which evenings belong here?" Elara gently shook her head. "No one. The museum does. It listens, it waits, and sometimes, many years after an evening has already passed, it quietly remembers what people almost forgot." Elias found himself slowing his footsteps. The gallery seemed strangely alive, not because the memories moved, but because each peaceful evening somehow carried the quiet heartbeat of an ordinary life. He suddenly understood something. History usually remembered extraordinary days, victories, discoveries, kings' wars, celebrations. but very few people ever remembered. The quiet evening when someone first felt safe again, or the evening a father decided to forgive himself, or the evening a lonely traveler realized they were no longer afraid of walking home alone. Perhaps those evenings had always mattered just as much, only no one had thought to preserve them. Until now, without realizing it, Elias gently tightened his hand around the handle of his blossom lantern. Its warm light grew just a little brighter, almost as though the lantern itself recognized that it had finally found a place where even the smallest light would never be forgotten. They wandered deeper into the gallery, never following a marked path. There wasn't one. The museum quietly allowed every visitor to discover its evenings in the order their own heart needed them. Some crystal frames remained still, while others slowly drifted through the warm air, changing places with such gentle patience that their movement could almost never be seen. Only after several quiet minutes would Elias realize that an entirely different memory now floated beside him. This place changes. Elias smiled. It listens. It knows that no two travelers carry the same questions. Elias looked around the peaceful gallery once more. Hundreds of forgotten evenings surrounded them, yet somehow none of them competed for attention. Every memory seemed perfectly content to wait, as though time itself had become wonderfully patient. Near the center of the room, one crystal frame glowed a little brighter than the others. Its light carried the warm colors of late autumn. Without speaking, both Elias and Alara slowly walked toward it. Inside, a young mother carefully buttoned a little boy's coat before he stepped outside into the first cold evening of the season. She paused, straightened his tiny scarf, then quietly kissed the top of his head. The little boy laughed, ran toward the garden gate, then suddenly stopped. He turned around, ran back, wrapped both arms around his mother without saying a single word. Only then did he race happily into the fading golden light. The memory gently faded. Elias remained silent. Alara waited. After a while, he finally spoke. It wasn't the goodbye. No, it was the turning back. Alara nodded. The museum remembers moments people almost miss. One extra hug, one last glance, one cup of tea that somehow tasted warmer than all the others. She looked toward the quiet crystal. Life rarely changes all at once. It changes one small evening at a time. They continued walking together. Another memory quietly revealed itself. A young violinist remained alone inside an empty concert hall. after everyone had gone home. She played one final melody, not for applause, not for practice, but simply because she loved how the music sounded inside an empty room. Another frame held nothing more than an elderly couple watering flowers together beneath a fading sunset. Neither spoke. One handed the watering can to the other. The other smiled. That was all. Yet somehow, the evening felt complete. Elias noticed something unexpected. Every memory preserved inside the museum shared one quiet truth. No one inside them believed they were living an unforgettable evening. They simply lived it. Only later, sometimes many years later, did those ordinary moments quietly become treasures. He looked toward Alara. Do people ever come searching for one specific evening? They do. And do they always find it? She gently shook her head. No, the museum never gives people the evening they ask for. It gives them the evening they truly need. Those words settled deeply inside him. Without warning, his thoughts drifted toward the peaceful station for sleeping travelers. He remembered the warm lanterns, the silent silver rails disappearing into the moonlit forest, the comforting stillness that had gently welcomed every weary traveler. At the time, it had simply felt like another beautiful place within the hidden library. Yet standing here now, he realized something. Perhaps that quiet station had already become one of his own forgotten evenings, not because anything extraordinary had happened, but because, for a little while, he had completely forgotten what it felt like to hurry. The realization filled him with a quiet gratitude he could not quite explain. His blossom lantern answered with another gentle glow, almost as though it too remembered. The gallery slowly curved toward another quiet room. Unlike the warm golden evenings they had just explored, this doorway glowed with the soft blue light of approaching twilight. The carved cedar sign above it simply read, *** evenings that changed everything. *** Elias looked toward Alara. This sounds different. It is. She folded her hands quietly before her. Most evenings help us rest, but every now and then, one ordinary evening quietly changes the direction of an entire life. Neither hurried forward. Somehow, the doorway itself invited slower footsteps. As they entered, Elias immediately noticed something unusual. The crystal frames here were much larger, almost as tall as windows. The memories inside them unfolded more slowly, allowing every small detail to breathe. The first memory revealed a young schoolteacher sitting alone inside an empty classroom after sunset. Papers covered her desk. Outside, soft rain tapped gently against the windows. For several long moments, she simply stared at a resignation letter resting before her. She sighed, folded it carefully, then quietly placed it into a drawer instead of sending it. The memory ended. Elias waited. That's all. Elias smiled. For that evening, yes. She looked toward the empty classroom. The following spring, one of her students discovered a love for astronomy. Years later, he helped design observatories that allowed millions of people to better understand the night sky. She paused. The world remembered the astronomer. The museum remembered the evening his teacher quietly decided not to leave. Elias looked back at the crystal frame. It no longer seemed ordinary. Another memory slowly awakened nearby. A young man stood beside a lonely park bench beneath falling autumn leaves. He removed a letter from his coat pocket. Read it one final time. Then, instead of tearing it apart, he carefully folded it, placed it back inside the envelope, and slipped it into his pocket. Nothing more happened. He forgave someone. Elias said softly. He simply wasn't ready to admit it until that evening. They continued onward. The room felt wonderfully peaceful. No dramatic music. No overwhelming emotion. Only quiet decisions made almost without anyone noticing. Elias suddenly understood why these evenings felt different. History often remembered loud moments. The museum remembered quiet choices. A decision to stay. A decision to forgive. A decision to begin again. None of them looked extraordinary while they happened. Yet years later, entire lives quietly rested upon those simple evenings. Near the far wall, one final crystal frame stood alone. Unlike every other memory, this one remained completely dark. No colors, no people, only a faint silver glow resting deep within the glass. Elias stopped. What happened here? For the first time since entering the museum, Alara did not answer immediately. She looked at the silent frame with quiet respect. Finally, she spoke. Not every evening has happened yet. Elias turned toward her. What do you mean? The museum doesn't only preserve the evenings people remember. She smiled gently. Sometimes it quietly waits for an evening that still belongs to the future. Those words lingered between them. Neither spoke again. The silent crystal remained motionless, its faint silver light glowing with endless patience. Somewhere, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, someone would unknowingly live the evening, already waiting inside that empty frame. And when that quiet moment finally arrived, the museum would simply remember. The quiet silver frame remained behind them, its unwritten evening still waiting somewhere beyond tomorrow. Neither Elias nor Alara spoke as they left the gallery. Some mysteries the museum preferred to answer slowly. The next corridor felt different. The warm golden lanterns gradually softened into the rich amber colors of late sunset. The air itself seemed warmer. Gentle music drifted somewhere beyond the cedar walls, not performed, but remembered, as though every note had once belonged to someone's peaceful evening. Along the corridor, small glass lanterns rested upon elegant wooden tables. Inside each lantern, a tiny sunset glowed endlessly. No two sunsets were ever the same. One carried shades of lavender, another shimmered with deep crimson, some glowed with soft peach light, while others slowly faded into quiet silver twilight. Elias paused beside one particularly beautiful lantern. Within it, the sun disappeared behind distant rolling hills, while hundreds of birds quietly crossed the evening sky. "It never ends," he whispered. "No." Elias smiled. "It always ends. We simply preserve the moment before it does." They continued walking until the corridor opened into another breathtaking hall. Unlike the previous galleries, this room contained almost no crystal frames. Instead, hundreds of comfortable chairs, wooden benches, old rocking chairs, garden swings, and small window seats had been arranged throughout the vast hall. Every seat faced a different beautiful evening. Some overlooked quiet oceans, some overlooked peaceful villages, others faced snowy mountains, golden wheat fields, or tiny cottages glowing beneath evening rain. Elias looked around in quiet wonder. "It feels more like a home." Ilara's smile became softer. "It was designed that way. This is where visitors stop walking and simply remain." Near the center of the room, an elderly couple quietly sat together beneath a painted autumn sky. Neither moved, neither spoke. They simply watched one preserved evening after another. Nearby, a young father held his sleeping daughter against his shoulder, while both rested peacefully inside a large wooden chair, not because they were tired, because they felt safe. Across the room, a young woman quietly knitted beside a window where gentle snow continued falling inside a preserved evening that never reached night. Nobody hurried. Nobody searched for the next gallery. Nobody checked the passing hour. Inside this hall, there seemed to be no reason to. Elias slowly lowered himself into an empty wooden chair, facing a peaceful lakeside sunset. For several long moments, nothing happened. No magical vision appeared. No voice spoke. Only the quiet evening before him. The water reflected fading golden light. A fisherman slowly folded his nets. Far across the lake, one small cottage lit its first evening lantern. Then another. Then another. Tiny lights quietly appeared one by one, until the shoreline shimmered like a necklace of warm stars. Without realizing it, Elias exhaled a long, slow breath. The kind of breath a weary traveler sometimes forgets to take. Alara remained standing nearby. The museum has a saying. Elias looked toward her. She smiled gently. Sometimes the greatest thing an evening can offer is permission to stop carrying the day. For the first time since entering the museum, Elias understood that not every gallery existed to teach. Some existed simply to let the heart rest. Elias remained seated before the quiet lakeside evening, long after he had stopped thinking about it. The preserved sunset never changed. The lanterns along the distant shore never burned lower. The fisherman never hurried home. Everything remained wonderfully still. Yet, the longer he watched, the more alive the evening seemed to become. Not because the memory changed, but because he did. It feels strange. He finally whispered, "I know this evening isn't mine, but somehow it still feels familiar." Alara gently lowered herself into the chair beside him. It happens to everyone. We spend so much of our lives believing our happiest memories must be unique. She looked toward the peaceful lake. But peace has a beautiful habit of looking very similar in every life. For a while, they simply watched together. The silence between them felt comfortable, not empty, the kind of silence that never asks to be filled. Eventually, Alara spoke again. "Would you like to know how the museum began?" Elias nodded. "I think I would." She smiled. "No one knows who built these halls. Even the hidden library speaks very little about its beginning. But one story has always remained." She folded her hands quietly in her lap. "It says, there was once a traveler who reached the end of a very long life. He had crossed kingdoms, sailed distant seas, climbed mountains, collected rare treasures, met remarkable people. When someone finally asked him, 'What was the happiest day of your life?' he couldn't answer. Elias listened quietly, not because he had forgotten. Alara continued, but because he realized it had never been a single day. It had been thousands of ordinary evenings. The evening his mother waited on the porch until he returned home. The evening rain kept everyone inside, while stories were shared beside the fire. The evening, a stranger smiled at him after a difficult journey. The evening, he watched birds crossing the autumn sky without needing to be anywhere else. She smiled softly. He understood that he had spent his whole life chasing extraordinary moments, while the ordinary ones had quietly become the greatest treasures of all. The story settled gently around them. Neither hurried to speak. At last, Elias looked across the peaceful lake once more. "I think I've been doing the same thing." Elara turned toward him. "What do you mean?" "I've always believed that every destination inside the hidden library would change me in some remarkable way." He smiled quietly. "But now I'm beginning to think they've been changing me one peaceful evening at a time." Elara's eyes brightened. The museum would consider that a wonderful discovery. Across the hall, a grandfather quietly helped his granddaughter complete a wooden puzzle beside another preserved sunset. Near one of the tall windows, a young musician rested with her violin across her lap, simply watching snow drift beyond the glass. Nobody seemed eager to leave. Nobody appeared worried about tomorrow. The entire hall carried a quiet understanding. Some evenings were never meant to accomplish anything. Some existed only to remind tired hearts what it felt like to simply be. As they rose from their chairs, Elias noticed something he had completely overlooked. No visitor inside the Hall of Rest carried a lantern. Not one. Their hands were empty. Some held books. Some held cups of tea. Some simply folded their hands peacefully in their laps. Yet every face seemed gently illuminated, as though the evenings themselves had become enough. He looked down at his own blossom lantern. Its familiar glow had softened, not faded, simply become quieter, almost as though it understood. Its purpose here was no longer to guide, only to accompany. "The lantern is resting," Elara said softly. Elias smiled. "I think it is." She nodded. Even light becomes tired, and even light deserves peaceful evenings. Together, they continued through the great hall. The museum grew quieter with every step, not because fewer people were present, but because every visitor seemed to understand the same unspoken agreement. There was no need to whisper, no need to remain silent, no need to behave in any particular way. Everyone simply allowed the evening to exist. As they reached another window, Elias stopped once more. Beyond the glass stretched an enormous lavender meadow beneath a slowly darkening sky. Fireflies floated above thousands of blooming flowers. Far away, a shepherd quietly gathered his sheep before nightfall, Nearby, two children lay upon the grass, trying to count the very first stars appearing overhead. The preserved evening felt wonderfully alive. So peaceful, Elias whispered. Elara looked beyond the same window. Do you know what makes this evening special? He studied it carefully. The fireflies. She smiled. No. The sunset. Again, she gently shook her head. The children. No. She waited a little longer before answering. No one inside this evening realizes that they are happy. Elias slowly turned toward her. They aren't thinking, I'll remember this forever. They aren't trying to capture it. They aren't afraid it will end. They are simply living it. Her words lingered softly. We often notice happiness only after it has already become a memory. Elias felt those words settle somewhere deep within him. He thought about the hidden library, every destination he had visited, the quiet tea shared beneath endless blossoms, the peaceful bridge where lanterns bloomed, the silent valley where bells sang without sound, the little blue bird beneath the wishing tree, the travelers sleeping peacefully inside the magical station. At the time, each place had simply been another beautiful step along the road. Only now, standing inside the museum, did he realize how many of those evenings had quietly become part of him. Perhaps without ever asking permission, his thoughts were interrupted by the gentle sound of porcelain. Across the hall, a young woman placed a fresh pot of tea upon a small cedar table. No announcement followed, no invitation. Yet within moments, 3 strangers quietly gathered around the table. None appeared to know one another. One smiled, another gently poured the tea. The third simply watched the evening beyond the windows. No introductions were exchanged. No conversation hurried to begin. The silence between them felt strangely complete. Elias watched for several moments. They've never met before. I don't think they have. They seem like old friends. Elara's smile carried the warmth of someone remembering something precious. Peace has a gentle way of making strangers feel less like strangers. The museum reminds people that they have always shared far more evenings than they ever realized. For a little while longer, they simply watched the 3 travelers sharing quiet tea beneath the endless amber glow. Nothing extraordinary happened. No great lesson arrived. No hidden doorway appeared. Only 3 weary souls, finding comfort inside the same peaceful evening. And somehow, it felt like one of the most beautiful moments Elias had witnessed since entering the hidden library. When they finally continued, the hall of rest gradually faded behind them. The next passage curved gently beneath a ceiling of carved cedar branches. Thousands of tiny, golden leaves had been carefully shaped into the wood above. As lantern light touched them, their shadows drifted slowly across the walls like autumn, carried by an invisible breeze. This hallway wasn't here before, Elias said quietly. Elias smiled. It was. You simply weren't ready to notice it. He looked around with gentle curiosity. I've heard that sentence before. You have, and you'll probably hear it again. The museum seemed to enjoy answering questions, not with explanations, but with patience. The corridor eventually opened into a circular room, unlike any they had seen before. There were no crystal frames, no preserved evenings, no paintings, only shelves, thousands upon thousands of beautifully crafted wooden drawers covered the curved walls from floor to ceiling. Each drawer was no larger than an ordinary letter. Each carried a tiny brass handle, nothing more. At the very center of the room stood a single round cedar table beneath a softly glowing lantern. Upon the table rested one small object, an old fountain pen. Beside it lay a stack of perfectly blank cream-colored cards. Elias slowly approached. What is this place? Elias's expression became almost reverent. This is the room of unwritten gratitude. He looked back toward the endless drawers. So many. There are far more than these. She gently rested her fingertips upon one of the tiny brass handles. The room simply grows whenever it needs to. Elias waited. Each drawer seemed almost identical. No names, no dates, no numbers, only smooth cedar polished by time. What belongs inside them? Elias opened one drawer, only a few inches. Inside rested a single folded card. She did not remove it. She simply allowed Elias to glimpse the elegant handwriting before gently closing the drawer again. A thank you. That was never spoken. The words lingered quietly between them. She continued walking slowly along the curved wall. Sometimes people carry gratitude for years. They mean to write. They mean to visit. They mean to say the words. She smiled sadly. But life keeps asking them to wait until tomorrow. Elias looked across the thousands of silent drawers. And tomorrow doesn't always arrive. Elias nodded. The museum never judges. It simply keeps a place for every kindness that lived inside someone's heart, even if it never reached another person. For several long moments, neither of them spoke. The room itself seemed to breathe with extraordinary gentleness. Every drawer represented words that had almost been shared. A daughter who never thanked her father for teaching her patience. A student who never told a teacher how one ordinary afternoon had changed an entire future. A traveler who never returned to thank the stranger who had once offered shelter during a storm. None of the gratitude had disappeared. It had simply waited. Elias slowly walked around the circular room. His fingertips hovered above several tiny brass handles, yet he never opened another drawer. Somehow, it felt wrong to read thankfulness that belonged to someone else's heart. Instead, he found himself thinking quietly, not about the hidden library, not about its mysteries, but about people, faces, voices, small moments from long ago, ordinary evenings that had seemed complete at the time, yet now felt unfinished, because somewhere, someone had never learned just how deeply they had been appreciated. Elias remained standing before the endless wall of cedar drawers, his thoughts drifting quietly through faces he had not remembered for many years. The room had not shown him a single memory, yet somehow it had awakened dozens. A village baker who always slipped an extra warm roll into his hands when winter mornings were especially cold. An old ferryman who refused payment after seeing how exhausted a young traveler looked. A little girl who had once returned a silver coin Elias himself had not even realized he had dropped. None of them knew that their kindness had continued traveling long after the evening itself had ended. Perhaps they never would. He slowly turned toward Alara. Does anyone ever come back after finally speaking the gratitude they carried? They do. And then she smiled. The museum smiles with them. Elias laughed softly. Can a building smile? I think some places can. She walked toward the small cedar table in the center of the room. The old fountain pen rested exactly where it had been, waiting. Beside it, the stack of blank cards remained untouched. No one is asked to write, Alara said quietly. The museum never asks. It only offers. She picked up one empty card. For a long moment, she simply held it between both hands. There was once a traveler who visited this room every autumn. He always chose a card. He always held the pen. And every year, he quietly placed both back exactly where he had found them. He never wrote. He believed. He had waited too long. Elias looked toward the empty card. What happened the following year? He never returned. The room became wonderfully still. No sadness filled it, only gentle understanding. Alara carefully returned the blank card to its place. The museum never judged him. It simply kept an empty drawer, waiting. Elias slowly reached for the fountain pen. Its polished wood felt surprisingly warm, not magical, not extraordinary, simply familiar, as though countless grateful hands had once held it before his own. He looked toward the blank cards. His fingers rested quietly against the edge of the paper. Then he smiled and gently placed the pen back upon the table. "You aren't writing," Ilara observed. "Not today." He looked around the peaceful room once more. "I think I still have time." Her eyes reflected quiet approval. "Then perhaps the museum has already given you exactly what you needed." They began walking once again. As Elias reached the doorway, something caught his attention. One tiny cedar drawer near the very bottom of the great curved wall had quietly opened by itself, only the width of a fingertip, nothing more inside. He could see only the corner of a folded cream-colored card. No name, no words, only a single pressed golden maple leaf resting carefully beside it. He looked toward Ilara. She had not opened it. She had not even noticed. Without thinking, Elias gently closed the tiny drawer, not because he feared what it contained, but because he understood some gratitude deserved to remain private. The drawer settled softly into place. Somewhere deep within the walls, a quiet wooden chime sounded, almost too gentle to hear, almost like a simple "thank you" beyond the room of unwritten gratitude. The museum became quieter than ever before, not because fewer visitors walked its halls, but because every footstep seemed to understand where it belonged. The corridor narrowed gently. The cedar walls gradually gave way to smooth stone, polished by countless peaceful evenings. Soft lanterns rested inside graceful alcoves, their golden light dancing lazily across the floor. Far ahead, a single open doorway welcomed them. No carved title rested above it. No lantern marked its purpose. Only silence, a beautiful, comforting silence. As Elias crossed the threshold, he instinctively stopped. The room before him appeared almost completely empty. No shelves, no paintings, no crystal frames, only one enormous circular window reaching from floor to ceiling. Beyond it, the evening sky stretched endlessly across the hidden library. The last colors of sunset slowly surrendered to deep blue twilight. Stars quietly appeared, one after another, never rushing the night. At the center of the room stood a single wooden bench. Nothing more. Elias looked around with gentle surprise. Is this another gallery? Ilara smiled. It might be the most important one. He looked again. It doesn't contain anything. It does. She slowly walked toward the bench. It contains space. They sat together without another word. Outside, the forest breathed peacefully beneath the first stars. Somewhere far away, a family of deer crossed a moonlit meadow. A small owl settled upon the branch of an ancient oak. Fireflies slowly awakened among the wildflowers. Nothing extraordinary happened, and yet neither of them wished to leave. After several quiet minutes, Elias finally spoke. When people leave the museum, they often try to remember everything they've seen. The beautiful evenings, the quiet lessons, the forgotten kindness. She looked toward the darkening sky, but memory becomes crowded. So the museum always gives one final gift. Elias remained silent. This room asks nothing of you. It teaches nothing. It simply gives your heart a little space to decide what it wishes to carry home. Those words settled gently inside him. He closed his eyes for only a moment. He did not see crystal frames. He did not see lanterns. Instead, he found himself remembering the little boy who had run back for one last hug, the teacher who quietly chose to stay, the strangers who shared peaceful tea, the tiny unopened drawer holding gratitude that might never be spoken. He smiled, not because he was trying to remember, because those evenings had already become part of him. When he opened his eyes, the first stars had multiplied across the heavens. The museum had never hurried the sunset. It had simply allowed evening to become night. Elias rose quietly from the bench. I think chapter 1 is complete. Elias looked toward the endless sky one final time. Then, with one slow, grateful breath, he stood beside her. Together, they walked toward the next quiet hallway, where another forgotten evening was already waiting to be remembered. The doorway beyond the reflection room opened without a sound. For the first few steps, Elias thought they had entered another quiet gallery. But almost immediately, he realized something was different. There were no lanterns, not a single one, yet the corridor was gently illuminated. The light seemed to come from nowhere, and everywhere it carried the soft silver blue glow of an evening sky only moments after sunset, when the last warmth of the day still lingered beneath the first arriving stars. The hallway stretched peacefully ahead. Its walls were lined with hundreds of elegant mirrors. None were identical. Some were tall and narrow. Others were perfectly round. A few carried beautifully carved oak frames, adorned with tiny leaves, stars, and blooming vines. Yet something about them felt unusual. None reflected Elias. As he paused before the nearest mirror, he saw only an empty corridor. No footsteps, no travelers, no museum, only stillness. He slowly reached toward the cool glass. His fingertips stopped just before touching it. "It isn't broken," Alara said gently. "It simply reflects something else." Elias looked toward her. "What does it show?" She smiled. "The evening your heart remembers most clearly." He looked back into the mirror. "Nothing changed. I don't see anything. You aren't trying to remember. You are trying to look." Her words settled quietly. Elias relaxed his shoulders. He allowed the silence to surround him. He stopped searching, stopped expecting, stopped asking, and then, very slowly, the empty mirror began to breathe with light. Not suddenly, not dramatically, like mist lifting from a quiet lake. Shapes slowly appeared. Warm, golden sunlight, a narrow dirt road, a tiny stone bridge crossing a peaceful stream, birdsong drifting through summer air. Then a boy, perhaps 10 years old. He sat beneath an old willow tree. His shoes rested beside him. His feet dangled happily above the cool water. A fishing rod lay forgotten across the grass. Instead of fishing, the boy simply watched dragonflies dancing above the stream. Nothing happened. No conversation. No lesson. Only a quiet summer evening. Elias stared at the reflection. "I know him." Alara remained silent. "That's me." His voice had become almost a whisper. "I'd forgotten this place." The mirror continued glowing softly. The little boy laughed quietly as one dragonfly landed upon the tip of his fishing rod. He smiled, not because anything extraordinary had happened, but because, for that one perfect evening, life had asked absolutely nothing of him. No destination, no responsibility, no fear, only the peaceful company of the fading sun, the singing stream, and the slow arrival of evening. Without warning, the memory gently dissolved. The mirror became still once again. Elias continued looking into the empty glass, almost hoping the little boy might return. "He won't," Alara said softly. "The museum never allows us to live our memories twice. It only reminds us that they were always real." A quiet smile slowly appeared upon Elias's face. "I'd forgotten how peaceful that evening was." Alara looked down the endless hallway of silent mirrors. "No, you only forgot that it had stayed with you all these years." They continued slowly along the hall of silent mirrors. Neither hurried toward the next reflection. Every mirror seemed content to wait. Some glowed softly as visitors approached. Others remained perfectly still, as though quietly respecting memories that were not yet ready to return. Far ahead, a young man stood alone before one of the larger mirrors. He smiled gently, then wiped a quiet tear from his cheek before continuing down the corridor. No one watched him. No one asked what he had seen. The museum understood. Some evenings were meant to remain beautifully private. Elias found himself wondering, does everyone see their own memories? They do. And are they always happy? Ilara's gentle smile faded into thoughtful silence. No, not always. She rested one hand lightly upon the carved wooden frame of a nearby mirror. The museum doesn't preserve perfect evenings. It preserves truthful ones. They stopped before another mirror. Unlike the first, this one shimmered almost immediately. Soft winter light slowly emerged from the silver glass. Snow drifted peacefully through the evening air. A tiny cottage rested beneath a blanket of fresh white snow. Warm golden light glowed from every window. Inside, a family gathered around a small wooden table. Steam rose gently from bowls of simple soup. Someone laughed. Someone reached for another piece of bread. Someone quietly poured tea. Nothing remarkable happened, yet the warmth inside that little cottage seemed almost able to reach through the glass itself. Elias watched in complete silence. I don't know them. No, Ilara replied. You aren't meant to. The memory slowly faded, but, he said thoughtfully, I still feel as though I miss them. She nodded. The museum calls these shared evenings. Shared. Some evenings belong to one family. Some belong to all of us. She looked toward the now quiet mirror. Almost everyone has known what it feels like to sit beside warm light while winter waits outside, to share simple food, to laugh over something forgotten before morning. The faces may change, but the feeling remains beautifully familiar. They continued onward. Mirror after mirror quietly reflected ordinary lives. A grandfather teaching his granddaughter how to whistle beneath an orange sunset. A group of neighbors carrying lanterns home after a village celebration. A young woman reading aloud while rain tapped softly against the roof. A father carefully repairing a child's favorite toy after everyone else had fallen asleep. None of these evenings belonged to Elias, yet each one somehow stirred something quietly recognizable within him. He finally understood. The museum was not asking visitors to remember specific people. It was reminding them that kindness, comfort, belonging, and love had always spoken the same quiet language, no matter whose evening they visited. For a long while, neither Elias nor Ilara spoke again. The endless mirrors continued glowing gently around them, each one quietly waiting for another heart ready to remember. The farther they walked, the quieter the hall of silent mirrors became. It was no longer the peaceful silence of a museum. It felt more like the silence that settles over the world just after fresh snow has fallen. Every sound seemed softer. Even their footsteps carried extraordinary gentleness across the polished cedar floor. After several more mirrors, they arrived before one unlike any Elias had yet seen. Its frame was carved from pale silver wood instead of oak. Tiny stars had been delicately inlaid around its edge. The glass itself shimmered with the deep blue colors of approaching night. Elias stopped walking. "This one is different." Elias looked toward her. "It only appears when someone has learned to stop searching." He smiled. "I thought we were always searching." "We are," she answered warmly. "But eventually, the journey teaches us how to notice." The mirror slowly awakened, not with a memory, with an evening that felt strangely familiar. The hidden library appeared. Its countless windows glowed softly beneath an endless twilight sky. Lanterns floated lazily through quiet gardens. Books rested peacefully upon ancient stone benches. Nothing unusual, nothing impossible, simply home. Then Elias saw himself, not the traveler standing beside Ilara, another Elias, one who had only just arrived at the hidden library for the very first time. He stood before its great entrance with uncertain eyes, holding nothing more than curiosity. He remembered that evening. He remembered believing that every answer waited somewhere ahead, that every destination would reveal another mystery, that one day he would finally understand everything. The younger Elias stepped through the library doors. The memory quietly faded. Elias continued watching the empty mirror. A soft laugh escaped him. "I was trying so hard." Elias smiled. "Weren't we all?" He lowered his gaze thoughtfully. "I thought I was searching for magical places. Weren't you?" "I don't think so." He looked once more toward the now silent mirror. "I think I was searching for the kind of peace I kept believing would come later." He paused. "But every place I've visited has been quietly teaching me. That peace was never waiting at the end of the journey." His smile became wonderfully calm. "It was walking beside me all along." Neither spoke. There was nothing left to explain. The museum had allowed Elias to answer his own question. Far above them, one tiny silver bell chimed somewhere deep within the unseen halls. Its gentle note floated through the corridor before disappearing into silence. Ilara looked upward with quiet affection. The museum likes that answer. Elias laughed softly. It approves. I don't think it approves. She smiled. I think it simply enjoys watching travelers remember what their hearts already knew. Together, they resumed their peaceful walk. Mirror after mirror reflected only empty silver glass once more, not because the memories had disappeared, but because the hall had already offered exactly what it wished to give. Sometimes the most meaningful reflection was not the one waiting inside the mirror. It was the quiet change already beginning inside the traveler who walked away. The hall of silent mirrors gradually came to an end. The last reflection quietly disappeared behind them, leaving only a peaceful stone archway bathed in soft evening light. Beyond it, a gentle fragrance drifted through the air. Lavender, fresh cedar, a trace of warm tea. The comforting scent reminded Elias of arriving home after a long journey. Before anyone had spoken a single word, as they stepped through the archway, the museum revealed another unexpected chamber. It resembled neither a gallery, nor a library, nor a hall. Instead, it felt like a collection of hundreds of tiny living rooms, each one different, each one complete. A small fireplace glowed inside one. Another held nothing more than a single rocking chair beside a rain-covered window. One overlooked an endless sunflower field beneath the setting sun. Another opened onto a quiet balcony where lanterns floated above a peaceful river. Every little room contained only the simplest comforts: a favorite chair, a warm blanket, a kettle quietly steaming, a bookshelf worn by loving hands, fresh flowers resting upon a windowsill. Nothing expensive, nothing grand, only places that immediately felt familiar. Elias slowly turned in quiet wonder. It feels as though everyone built their own evening. Ilara nodded. They did. She walked toward one small room where an old wooden chair rested beside a crackling fire. The museum calls these places the heart returns to. Elias looked around, but some of these places no longer exist. They don't have to. She smiled gently. The heart remembers differently than the world. She stepped aside. Inside the little room, a pair of worn slippers rested neatly beside the fireplace. A knitted blanket lay folded across the chair. Upon a tiny table sat a blue ceramic mug beside an open book. No person appeared, only the quiet traces of someone who had once loved, spending peaceful evenings there. It almost feels like someone just stepped outside. They did, Ilara answered softly. They stepped outside, many years ago, but the peace they left behind never did. Elias felt an unexpected warmth settle inside his chest. Not sadness, gratitude. The room carried no loneliness, only love that had quietly remained. They wandered through several more little rooms. One belonged to a lighthouse keeper. Its windows overlooked an endless moonlit sea, while a brass telescope rested beside a comfortable chair. Another overlooked rolling vineyards, glowing beneath autumn twilight. One tiny room contained nothing but floor cushions surrounding a low wooden table where fresh bread, warm soup, and little clay cups waited patiently beneath hanging lanterns. Every room whispered the same quiet invitation. Stay a while. There is no hurry here. At the very end of the chamber, Elias noticed something unusual. One small room stood completely empty. No chair, no fireplace, no window, only smooth wooden floors, warm evening light, and peaceful silence. He looked toward Alara. This one hasn't been finished. She smiled. No, it hasn't been discovered. He looked again. It belongs to someone. It belongs to whoever is still creating it. Those words lingered gently between them. For the first time, Elias realized that not every peaceful evening waited somewhere in the past. Some were quietly waiting inside tomorrow. Elias quietly stepped toward the empty room. Its doorway carried no name, no carved sign, no lantern, only a soft golden light that seemed to breathe as gently as evening itself. He stopped at the threshold. Unlike every other room, nothing inside invited him to remember. Instead, it quietly invited him to imagine. The polished wooden floor reflected the warm glow of twilight. The empty walls seemed almost alive, not because they moved, but because they waited, patiently, peacefully, as though they already knew someone would eventually fill them. Elias looked toward Alara. Does everyone see an empty room? They do. And does everyone's room stay empty? She smiled, only until they begin noticing where their heart feels most at home. He stepped inside. The room remained silent. No magical vision appeared. No hidden doorway opened. Only stillness. He slowly walked across the smooth wooden floor. Each step echoed softly, not with sound, but with possibility. Then, almost too gently to notice, one wall began to glow, not brightly, like the first faint light inside a cottage before evening fully arrives. A single window slowly appeared, simple, round. Its wooden frame carried delicate carvings of tiny stars. Beyond it, lay an endless meadow beneath soft moonlight. Tall grasses swayed gently. Fireflies drifted lazily above the wildflowers. Far away, the outline of the hidden library rested beneath the evening sky. Nothing more. The room became quiet once again. Elias smiled. It changed. It listened. Alara answered. It always begins with one small thing. Never the whole room. Why? Because homes are never built all at once. He nodded thoughtfully. That felt true. Every peaceful place he had loved inside the hidden library had revealed itself little by little. Never all at once. Never in a hurry. He looked once more through the little round window. The meadow remained wonderfully still. The fireflies continued their quiet dance. Without thinking, he whispered, "I think I'd like to sit here someday." Almost immediately, a comfortable wooden chair appeared beneath the window. Neither dramatic nor magical. It simply was. Elias laughed softly. "I didn't even ask. The museum wasn't waiting for your words." Alara replied with a smile. "It was listening to your heart." He slowly sat down. The chair fit him perfectly, as though it had always belonged there. The view beyond the window seemed even more peaceful now. He imagined reading there, watching quiet evenings arrive one after another, sharing warm tea with a trusted friend, listening to gentle rain, saying very little, feeling completely at home. For several long moments, nothing else appeared. The room seemed content. One window, one chair, one peaceful view. That was enough. Elias finally stood once more. "I thought it would become something much grander." Alara gently shook her head. "The heart rarely begins with grand things. It begins with one place where it finally feels safe." Together, they quietly stepped back into the hallway. Behind them, the little room remained exactly as it had become. Still simple, still unfinished, still patiently waiting for the peaceful evenings that had not yet been lived. They left the unfinished room behind and continued walking beneath the quiet amber glow of the corridor. For a long while, neither Elias nor Alara spoke. Some discoveries became gentler when carried in silence. The museum seemed to understand. The hallway gradually widened until it opened onto a circular balcony, unlike any place Elias had seen before. There were no walls, only graceful stone arches overlooking an endless evening sky. The hidden library stretched peacefully below. Its rooftops shimmered beneath moonlight. Thousands of warm lanterns glowed among winding garden paths. Far beyond, silver forests swayed softly beneath the night breeze. Every destination Elias had visited seemed somehow present, not physically, but in spirit. He almost imagined he could see the distant clockmaker's wing, the quiet river where lanterns floated forever, the observatory above the clouds, the bridge of blooming lanterns, the station for sleeping travelers resting peacefully beneath the stars. Everything belonged to the same beautiful world. Everything belonged to home. Elias rested both hands upon the smooth stone railing. "I've been thinking." Ilara joined him beside the balcony. "I know." He smiled. "You always seem to. The museum makes listening easier." He watched the endless lanterns below. "When I first entered the hidden library, I believed every destination existed to teach me something. And now," he remained quiet for several breaths, "I think they exist because some kinds of peace can only be experienced. They can never truly be explained." Ilara's smile carried quiet admiration. "That is why stories exist." Elias looked toward her. "They cannot hand us peace. They simply walk beside us until we discover it ourselves." A gentle breeze drifted across the balcony. It carried the comforting fragrance of cedar, lavender, and distant evening rain. Far below, one lantern slowly brightened, then another, then another. The library seemed almost alive, breathing quietly beneath the stars. Ilara looked toward the horizon. "The museum ends here." Elias blinked. "Already?" She nodded gently. "It only feels short, because peaceful evenings never ask us to count the hours." He laughed softly. "That's true. The heart measures them differently." For a little while longer, they remained together beneath the endless night sky. Neither wished to leave first. Finally, a familiar doorway appeared at the far end of the balcony. Not suddenly, simply, as though it had always been waiting there. Its cedar frame glowed softly beneath a single lantern. Beyond it, another peaceful corridor disappeared into quiet golden light. Elias looked toward the open doorway, then back across the hidden library one final time. He realized something that made him smile. The museum had not filled his heart with memories. It had quietly taught him how to notice the evenings he was still living. And somehow, that felt like the greatest gift of all. Together, without hurry, they stepped through the waiting doorway, leaving the museum of forgotten evenings behind, while carrying its quiet light with them. When Elias stepped beyond the museum, he expected to find another winding corridor within the hidden library. Instead, he found himself standing beneath the open evening sky. The transition had been so gentle, he hadn't even noticed the walls disappear. Above him, countless stars shimmered peacefully across the heavens. Ahead, a narrow stone path stretched through a quiet grove of ancient cedar trees. Their branches swayed slowly in the cool night breeze, whispering softly to one another. Behind him, the Museum of Forgotten Evenings stood exactly as it always had. Warm lanterns glowed behind its tall windows. Its great wooden doors rested peacefully beneath thousands of tiny brass stars. Nothing about it suggested that extraordinary memories waited inside. It simply looked welcoming. Elias turned back one final time. "I don't feel like I've left." Elias smiled. "You haven't. The hidden library never asks anyone to leave. It simply walks with them differently." Together, they followed the moonlit path. For several peaceful minutes, they heard nothing except the gentle chorus of crickets, the rustling leaves overhead, and their quiet footsteps upon smooth stone. Eventually, the trees began to thin. A wide meadow slowly unfolded before them. Silver grass rolled gently beneath the moonlight. Fireflies drifted lazily above tiny wildflowers. At the very center of the meadow stood an enormous oak tree, unlike any Elias had ever seen. Its branches stretched gracefully across the night sky. Thousands of tiny lanterns hung among its leaves, not lit by flame, but by a warm golden light that seemed to grow from within the wood itself. Beneath the great tree, a handful of travelers rested quietly upon circular stone benches. Some watched the stars, others sipped warm tea. A young musician gently played a small wooden flute. The melody drifted through the meadow like a slow evening breeze, never asking to be noticed, only quietly accompanying the night. No one appeared to be waiting. No one appeared eager to continue their journey. The place carried the comforting feeling that arriving was enough. "What is this place?" Elias whispered. Alara looked toward the great lantern tree with unmistakable affection. "This is the traveler's pause." He smiled. "It isn't another destination. It belongs to all of them." She walked toward one of the stone benches. "Every traveler eventually arrives here, not because they are lost, but because every heart sometimes needs an evening with no lesson at all." Elias slowly sat beside her. Above them, the lanterns hanging among the branches swayed gently together. One by one, they reflected softly in his eyes. For the first time since entering the museum, he realized something surprising. He no longer felt curious about what came next. He simply felt grateful for where he already was. For a long while, Neither Elias nor Ilara spoke. There seemed to be no need. The traveler's pause possessed a rare kind of silence, one that never asked questions, never expected answers, and never hurried anyone toward tomorrow. The young musician beneath the great oak continued playing. The melody carried no beginning and no ending. It simply wandered peacefully through the meadow, joining the whispering grass, the gentle wind, and the quiet breathing of every traveler gathered beneath the lantern tree. Elias looked around. The people resting here appeared wonderfully different from one another. A weathered sailor quietly polished an old brass compass. A young woman carefully pressed wildflowers between the pages of a worn journal. Two elderly friends shared a chessboard, though neither seemed particularly interested in winning. Nearby, a little boy rested with his head upon his father's shoulder, already peacefully asleep beneath the warm lantern light. No one interrupted anyone else, yet somehow everyone belonged together. "It feels," Elias said softly, "like everyone already knows one another." Ilara smiled. "They probably don't. Then why does it feel that way?" She watched a pair of fireflies slowly circling one another beneath the great tree. Because every traveler who reaches this place has already learned the same quiet lesson. He looked toward her. Which lesson? She took a slow breath. That not every journey is measured by how far we travel. Some are measured by how gently we learn to arrive. Those words drifted through him like the evening breeze. He realized that during his earliest days, inside the hidden library, he had always been eager for the next doorway, the next mystery, the next beautiful destination. Now, for perhaps the first time, he felt completely content remaining exactly where he was. Above them, one lantern slowly brightened, then another soon. The entire great oak shimmered with thousands of tiny golden lights. None outshone the others. Together, they created something far more beautiful than any single lantern ever could. Elias watched them quietly. "They remind me of evenings." Ilara smiled. "They are." He turned toward her in surprise. She nodded gently. Every traveler who leaves the hidden library leaves behind one peaceful evening. It isn't taken away. It isn't lost. It simply becomes another lantern upon the traveler's pause. Elias looked upward again. Thousands upon thousands of warm lights rested peacefully among the branches. So every lantern belongs to someone who once found a little more peace than they carried when they arrived. A quiet warmth spread through Elias's chest. He found himself wondering which evening of his own might someday glow among those branches. Perhaps the little stream from his childhood. Perhaps the quiet station beneath the stars. Perhaps an evening that had not even happened yet. The thought made him smile. For once, he did not need to know the answer. It would arrive when it was ready, and until then, the lanterns above would continue glowing patiently for every traveler still making their way home. The melody beneath the great oak slowly came to an end, not with a final note, but with a silence so gentle that no one could quite tell where the music had finished and the evening itself had begun. The young musician smiled quietly, placed the little wooden flute inside a cloth case, and simply leaned back against the ancient trunk. No applause followed. None was needed. Several travelers closed their eyes for a peaceful moment. Others simply smiled to themselves. The music had not entertained them. It had accompanied them. Elias watched with quiet admiration. No one thanked her. Elara looked toward the young musician. I think they already did. He tilted his head slightly. How? By listening. Her answer lingered gently between them. Elias realized there were many kinds of gratitude. Some were spoken, some were written, and some could only be offered through quiet presence. A warm breeze drifted across the meadow. The branches of the great lantern tree swayed together, sending thousands of tiny golden reflections dancing across the silver grass. One small lantern slowly drifted downward from the highest branch. It did not fall. It floated as lightly as a feather carried upon evening air. The little lantern came to rest upon the grass, only a few steps from Elias. Its warm glow was softer than candlelight, almost like the last rays of sunset, gently cupped inside delicate glass. He looked toward Elara. She smiled, but made no movement. It chose you. It did. She nodded. The traveler's pause sometimes shares a lantern. Elias carefully lifted the tiny light into both hands. It felt warm, comfortably warm, like holding a mug of tea on a cool autumn evening. Inside the lantern, there was no flame, only countless tiny golden particles slowly drifting in peaceful circles, almost like memories, learning to dance together. What does it mean? Elara looked thoughtfully toward the great oak. It isn't a gift. It isn't a reward. It is only a reminder. A reminder of what? She waited a few quiet breaths before answering. That whenever the road ahead feels long, you already carry enough light to take the very next step. Elias looked into the little lantern once more. The words felt strangely familiar, not because he had heard them before, but because somewhere deep inside, he had always believed them. Very gently, he placed the little lantern back upon the grass. Almost immediately, it floated upward once more, slowly, peacefully, returning to its place among the thousands of other lights resting inside the ancient branches. No traveler watched it rise. No one pointed toward it. The lantern simply returned home, exactly as naturally as evening becomes night. Elias followed it with his eyes until it disappeared among the countless warm lights above. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered, "Thank you," whether he spoke to the lantern, the great tree, the museum, or the journey itself. He could not quite say. Perhaps it didn't matter. The evening seemed to understand all the same. The little lantern disappeared among the branches, and the great oak returned to its quiet rhythm. Nothing seemed different, yet Elias somehow felt lighter, as though something he had been carrying, without ever noticing, had quietly been set down. The evening deepened around them. Above, the stars multiplied one by one across the endless sky. Below, the silver meadow shimmered softly beneath their gentle light. Far beyond the rolling hills, the hidden library glowed like a peaceful constellation resting upon the earth. No walls separated it from the night. No gates closed its gardens. It simply welcomed whoever arrived with an open heart. A soft fragrance drifted through the meadow. Fresh bread, wild honey, warm herbs. Elias looked toward the source. Several travelers had quietly gathered around a long cedar table beneath the lantern tree. Someone poured tea. Someone sliced fresh bread. Someone placed bowls of warm soup upon the polished wood. No invitation was spoken. No announcement was made. Yet, one by one, travelers naturally found their places around the table. Not assigned, simply found. Elias stood. "I think supper is ready." Elias smiled. "It feels strange." "What does?" "No one seems responsible. No one appears to be hosting." She laughed softly. "Perhaps everyone is." Together, they joined the quiet gathering. A place already seemed to be waiting for them. A steaming cup of tea rested beside Elias's wooden plate. No one had placed it there while he watched. It simply belonged. Across the table, a young traveler offered him a small basket of warm bread with a gentle smile. No names were exchanged, only kindness. Elias accepted the bread. "Thank you." The traveler nodded once, then quietly continued, enjoying the evening. Nothing more needed to be said. The meal unfolded with the same peaceful rhythm as everything else inside the hidden library. No hurried conversations, no uncomfortable silence, only gentle moments. Someone quietly admired the stars. Another traveler described the scent of autumn rain in a distant valley. The young musician smiled while listening, occasionally stirring honey into her tea. An elderly gardener softly laughed as a tiny robin landed upon the edge of the table, patiently waiting for a crumb. Even the little bird seemed wonderfully unafraid. Elias noticed something remarkable. Although everyone came from different journeys, different ages, different lives, no one tried to impress anyone else. No one spoke of achievements. No one compared destinations. The evening itself was already enough. He slowly looked around the table. I don't think I've ever shared a meal quite like this. Elara lifted her teacup. Perhaps because this meal asks nothing from anyone. It only asks us to be present. Elias lifted his own cup. The tea carried the delicate flavors of chamomile, wild mint, and something wonderfully familiar he couldn't quite name. It tasted like comfort. For several long, peaceful moments, everyone simply shared the evening together. No one counted the passing hours. No one wondered what tomorrow would bring. The lanterns above continued glowing softly. The stars continued appearing quietly. And somewhere deep within the hidden library, another peaceful evening found its way gently home. The simple meal gradually came to its natural end, not because every plate had been emptied, nor because the tea had grown cold. It simply reached that quiet moment when conversation gently becomes contentment. One by one, travelers carried their cups back to the long cedar table. No one asked them to. No one organized the gathering. Everyone simply seemed to know. Small kindnesses became even more beautiful when shared without being noticed. Elias quietly placed his own cup beside the warm kettle. As he stepped back, he noticed the young traveler who had first offered him bread. She was carefully folding a linen cloth across the table, not because it was necessary, only because she wished to leave the evening as peacefully as she had found it. Without speaking, Elias picked up another folded cloth resting nearby. She looked toward him. A warm smile appeared. Nothing more was needed. For several quiet minutes, they worked side by side, straightening chairs, returning small bowls, gathering empty cups. No one directed them. No one thanked them. The work itself felt strangely peaceful. When they finished, the long table looked exactly as it had before supper began, as though the meal itself had quietly become another beautiful evening waiting to be remembered. The young traveler finally spoke. You fold them neatly. Elias smiled. I've had good teachers. She laughed softly. I think we all have. Then, with another quiet smile, she simply wandered back toward the lantern tree. Elias realized he had never learned her name, and somehow that felt perfectly right. Not every kind person needed to become a lifelong companion. Some entered an evening, offered one small kindness, and gently continued along their own road. Yet their kindness remained. Perhaps that was enough. As Elias turned, he found Alara waiting beneath the great oak. She had been watching the stars through the gently moving lanterns overhead. Come, she said quietly. I'd like to show you one last place before we leave. They walked together beyond the meadow. A narrow path curved through tall silver grass until it reached a small wooden gate woven entirely from flowering vines. Beyond the gate lay a tiny garden, unlike the great gardens Elias had visited elsewhere in the hidden library. This one contained only a handful of flowers: white jasmine, blue forget-me-nots, golden evening primrose. A single stone bench rested beneath a flowering cherry tree, whose pale blossoms drifted silently through the moonlight. The entire garden felt almost hidden, as though very few travelers ever found it. What is this place? Elias whispered. Alara gently brushed one blossom as it floated past. The Garden of Enough. He looked around slowly. It seems very small. She smiled. It is, because enough never needs to be large. They sat together upon the stone bench. Above them, one blossom slowly landed upon Elias's shoulder. He smiled, but made no movement to brush it away. The little flower rested there peacefully, as though it, too, had found exactly where it belonged. The little blossom remained upon Elias's shoulder, light as a whispered thought. Neither he nor Alara spoke. The Garden of Enough seemed to prefer silence, not because words were unwelcome, but because everything worth saying had already been gently placed into the evening itself. A tiny stone fountain rested near the center of the garden. Its water rose only a few inches before quietly returning home. There were no grand waterfalls, no magnificent streams, only the soft, endless sound of water finding peace with itself. Elias listened. The rhythm reminded him of breathing, slow, steady, unhurried. I used to believe, he finally said, that enough meant stopping. Alara turned toward him, and now he watched another blossom drift across the moonlit garden. I think enough means noticing. She smiled. The garden likes that answer." He laughed quietly. "The museum liked one. The traveler's pause liked another. Does every place have an opinion?" She laughed with him. "No, only every place listens." Above them, the cherry blossoms continued falling. None hurried to reach the ground. Each blossom simply allowed the evening breeze to choose its path. Elias watched one land beside the little fountain. Another settled among the jasmine. One floated peacefully upon the quiet water. None seemed to arrive in the wrong place. Perhaps there was no wrong place for something that had learned to trust the wind. Far beyond the garden, the great bell of the hidden library sounded once. A single warm, gentle note, not announcing an ending, only reminding the night that another peaceful evening had quietly found its place among countless others. Elias slowly rose from the stone bench. "I think it's time." Elias stood beside her. He looked around the little garden one final time. Its flowers, its fountain, its simple stone bench, its drifting blossoms. Nothing about it asked to be remembered. And perhaps, because of that, he knew he never would forget it. As they reached the little vine-covered gate, Elias paused. He looked back once more, the blossom resting upon his shoulder, finally slipped gently into the evening breeze. It floated through the moonlight, joining the countless others, dancing quietly beneath the stars. He smiled, not because something beautiful had ended, but because he finally understood. Some evenings never truly leave us. They simply become part of the quiet way we learn to see the world. Together, Elias and Alara stepped beyond the little garden, following the peaceful lantern-lit path deeper into the hidden library, where another gentle discovery already waited beneath the stars. The lantern-lit path carried them gently away from the garden of enough. Behind them, the blossoms continued drifting peacefully through the moonlight. Ahead, the hidden library seemed quieter than Elias had ever known it. Not asleep, simply resting. Its countless windows glowed softly beneath the stars, like friendly homes waiting patiently through the night. The path gradually curved upward. Soon, they reached a gentle hill, overlooking almost the entire hidden library. For a long while, neither Elias nor Alara moved. They simply stood together beneath the quiet heavens. The journey had begun with questions. Now, it felt complete, without needing any answers. Far below, the roofs of the library shimmered beneath silver moonlight. Lanterns floated lazily through peaceful gardens. Tiny bridges crossed quiet streams. Every destination Elias had visited over the seasons seemed to belong to one great living story. The clockmaker's wing, the river of floating lanterns, the garden of forgotten dreams, the house where every window glowed, the conservatory of whispering rain, the orchard of golden moons, the observatory above the clouds, the tea house between seasons, the mapmaker's hall, the valley of silent bells, the bridge of blooming lanterns, the station for sleeping travelers, and now the museum of forgotten evenings, each place different, yet somehow each had quietly been teaching the same truth, using different evenings. Elias smiled to himself. I finally understand something. Elias looked toward him. What do you understand? He remained silent for several breaths. I used to think the hidden library was full of magical places. He looked across the peaceful rooftops below. But now, I think the hidden library is really full of ordinary moments, seen with peaceful eyes. Ilara's smile carried quiet pride. The library has been hoping you would discover that. He laughed softly. It has. I think every traveler eventually does. A gentle breeze crossed the hilltop. It carried the scent of cedar, old books, evening rain, and blooming flowers. Every fragrance seemed strangely familiar now, not because he had smelled them before, but because they had quietly become part of home. Far away, one lantern slowly rose into the night sky, then another, then several more. None hurried upward. Each simply floated peacefully, joining the stars, one quiet light at a time. Elias watched them until they disappeared into the endless heavens. They look as though they are going somewhere. Ilara gently shook her head. No, they are reminding us that some beautiful things were never meant to be kept. They were only meant to be witnessed. The words settled gently inside him. He realized that perhaps every destination inside the hidden library had been doing exactly that, not asking him to hold onto beautiful evenings, only inviting him to notice them while they were here. And somehow that made every ordinary evening waiting beyond the library feel even more precious. They remained upon the quiet hill, watching the lanterns slowly become stars. No one counted how many rose into the night. Some evenings were never meant to be measured, only experienced. After a little while, Ilara began walking once more. The path beyond the hill was unlike any Elias had followed before. It carried no lanterns, no signposts, no carved wooden markers, only smooth white stones resting naturally along the earth. They seemed almost to glow beneath the moonlight, not brightly, just enough, the kind of light that allowed each next step to quietly reveal itself. Elias smiled. It reminds me of the little lantern. Ilara looked down at the path. It should. The same lesson. She nodded gently. The road never asks you to see the entire journey. It only asks you to trust the next peaceful step. The words settled naturally inside him. Perhaps that had always been true, not only here, but everywhere ahead. The path reached a narrow wooden bridge, crossing a small stream. The water flowed so slowly, it almost seemed to be standing still. Moonlight shimmered across its surface like scattered silver leaves. Elias paused halfway across. Looking down, he expected to see his reflection. Instead, he saw the stars. The water reflected only the night sky above. No face, no traveler, only endless constellations gently drifting across quiet water. He looked toward Ilara. This stream doesn't reflect us. No, it reflects where we're looking. He watched the stars dancing softly upon the water. If someone looked down while worrying, what would they see? She smiled warmly. The museum would probably ask why they forgot to look upward first. He laughed. I think that's something it would say. I think so too. Together, they crossed the little bridge. Beyond it, the hidden library seemed to open even wider before them. Not larger, simply more familiar. Elias no longer felt like a visitor, wandering through impossible places. He felt as though he had become part of the quiet rhythm itself. The whispering trees, the glowing lanterns, the drifting evenings, the gentle conversations, the peaceful silences, all of them now felt wonderfully known, not because he understood every mystery, but because he no longer needed to. Some mysteries became even more beautiful when they remained softly unanswered. A robin quietly landed upon the wooden railing behind them. It sang one gentle evening note, then flew peacefully into the moonlit trees. Elias watched until it disappeared. Then, without thinking, he smiled. The hidden library had quietly changed him. Not all at once, not dramatically, evening by evening, step by step, exactly as peaceful journeys always do. The moon climbed a little higher. Its gentle silver light settled across the rooftops of the hidden library until every stone path, every quiet garden, and every lantern seemed wrapped in peaceful stillness. Elias noticed something unexpected. The library no longer felt endless, not because it had become smaller, but because it no longer felt unfamiliar. Every place he had visited now seemed connected, like chapters of the same quiet story. No destination stood alone. Each gently illuminated the next. As they continued walking, the white stone path gradually curved toward a familiar sight. Ahead stood the great entrance of the hidden library itself. The enormous wooden doors rested quietly beneath their carved archway. The countless warm windows glowed exactly as they had on the evening Elias first arrived. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He slowed his steps. "I've been here before." Elias smiled. "You have. It feels different." "It should." He stood for a moment before the great doors. The first evening returned gently to him. He remembered standing here, filled with questions, wondering whether he belonged, wondering whether he would ever understand this impossible place. He smiled quietly now. The questions no longer mattered. Belonging had arrived long before understanding. The realization filled him with a deep, comfortable peace. A familiar lantern beside the doorway flickered softly. Its warm light spilled across the polished stone steps. Elias reached out, running his fingertips lightly along the smooth wooden door. The cedar felt wonderfully familiar beneath his hand, almost like greeting an old friend. "You know," he said softly, "I don't think the hidden library ever changed." Elara looked at him with quiet affection. "No, it waited." He nodded slowly. "And I changed." Neither spoke again. The evening itself seemed to complete the thought. Far overhead, the stars continued appearing one by one. None hurried, none competed. Each simply arrived when its own quiet time had come. Elias realized people were not so different. Peace rarely arrived all at once. It revealed itself. One ordinary evening, one gentle kindness, one quiet discovery at a time. And perhaps that was exactly how it was always meant to be. A soft breeze drifted through the library gardens. Somewhere nearby, pages turned inside an open book. A distant clock quietly marked another peaceful hour. Nothing extraordinary happened, yet Elias found himself thinking, if someone had asked him to choose one perfect evening, he would never have been able to, because now he understood the most beautiful evenings were never trying to become unforgettable. They simply allowed us to become a little more ourselves. They quietly stepped through the great wooden doors. Inside, the hidden library welcomed them with the same gentle warmth it always had. The air carried the familiar fragrance of cedar shelves, old paper, fresh tea, and softly burning lantern oil. Nothing announced their return. No bells, no voices, only the quiet feeling That home had noticed them. Elias looked across the vast entrance hall. Travelers moved peacefully between the shelves. A librarian carefully returned a weathered book to its place. Someone sat beside a tall window, reading beneath the moonlight. Another traveler quietly watered a collection of tiny flowering plants, resting along the balcony. Everything continued exactly as it always had, and somehow that constancy felt deeply comforting. It never sleeps, Elias whispered. Elias smiled. It rests. The library knows the difference. They walked slowly along the central gallery. The polished wooden floor reflected the warm lantern light in long golden ribbons. Above, countless balconies disappeared into gentle shadows filled with books, stories, and quiet promises waiting to be discovered. Elias stopped beside one familiar shelf. A single book rested there. Its dark blue cover shimmered softly beneath the lantern light. There was no title, no author, only a tiny silver lantern embossed upon its spine. He looked toward Alara. It wasn't here before. It wasn't. She nodded gently. It has been waiting. For me. For your journey. With quiet curiosity, Elias lifted the book from the shelf. It felt neither heavy nor light, simply comfortable, like something that already belonged in his hands. He slowly opened the first page. The paper was completely blank. He turned another and another. Every page remained empty. He smiled. There's nothing written. Ilara's eyes sparkled warmly. Not yet. He looked back at the blank pages. It isn't a story. It will become one. She gently closed the cover. The hidden library never writes anyone's journey for them. It only keeps a place where that journey may one day rest. Elias ran his fingertips across the silver lantern embossed upon the cover. For the first time, he understood something he had never considered before. The library did not collect stories. It quietly waited until people became ready to tell them. He carefully returned the empty book to its place, not because it was unfinished, but because its quiet pages already held something beautiful, possibility. As they continued walking, Elias glanced back one final time. The little blue book rested peacefully among thousands of others, waiting patiently, never asking to be opened too soon, just as every peaceful evening had patiently waited until he was finally ready to notice it. They left the quiet shelf behind and wandered without destination through the peaceful heart of the hidden library. For once, Elias felt no desire to discover another hidden room, no secret doorway, no forgotten map. Every step itself had quietly become enough. The library seemed to notice. The corridors gradually grew softer. The lanterns burned with an even gentler glow. The voices of distant travelers faded until only the quiet turning of pages remained. Eventually, they arrived before one final window. It was taller than any Elias had seen before. From floor to ceiling, clear crystal looked out across the endless night. Beyond it, the hidden library disappeared into rolling forests, silver rivers, and peaceful valleys stretching farther than sight could follow. Somewhere, other travelers were beginning their own journeys. Some had only just discovered the library's doors. Some were still searching for them. Others, perhaps without realizing it, were already carrying its quiet light home. Elias rested one hand lightly against the cool glass. "I've been thinking about something." Elara stood beside him. "What is it?" He watched the distant forests. "I used to believe peace was something you found." She remained silent, allowing the thought to grow. "But now, I think peace notices us first." He smiled softly. "It waits patiently until we're finally quiet enough to recognize it." For several moments, neither spoke. Outside, a family of lantern birds crossed the moonlit sky. Their tiny golden lights drifted slowly above the forests before disappearing among the stars. Elias followed them until they vanished. Then he quietly laughed. "I don't think I'll ever stop noticing evenings now." "I hope not," Elara answered warmly. "The world needs people who notice them." He looked toward her. "And if I forget?" She smiled with the same quiet kindness she had carried since the beginning of the journey. "Then one ordinary evening will gently remind you again." Those words settled peacefully inside him, not as advice, not as wisdom, simply as truth. Far below the window, one lantern beside a quiet garden path slowly brightened. Then another soon. The whole pathway glowed warmly through the darkness. No traveler appeared upon it, yet every lantern patiently remained lit, waiting, ready, welcoming. Elias understood. That was what the hidden library had always been. Not a place that demanded visitors, a place that quietly remained ready whenever a weary heart finally arrived. He closed his eyes for one slow breath. When he opened them again, the night somehow seemed even more beautiful than before. Not because it had changed, because he had. The quiet window remained behind them, its peaceful view gently fading into the warm glow of the library. Elias and Elara continued walking, not toward another destination, but simply through the familiar heart of the hidden library. No maps guided them, No signs pointed the way. The journey no longer needed directions. Eventually, they arrived at a small circular courtyard open to the stars. In its center, a single lantern rested upon a smooth stone pedestal, unlike every other lantern Elias had seen. This one shone with an extraordinarily gentle light, neither golden nor silver, but something beautifully between the two. The light seemed almost alive, not moving, simply breathing around the lantern. No benches waited, no flowers bloomed, no statue stood, only quiet space. Elias stopped. So this is where every journey ends? Elias asked softly. She smiled. No, this is where every journey becomes part of the next. He looked again toward the softly glowing lantern. I don't understand. You don't need to, she answered gently. The library never asks anyone to carry every lesson. It only hopes that one quiet light continues traveling with them. For several peaceful moments, they stood together beneath the stars. The little lantern continued glowing, unchanging, steady, comforting, almost like a calm heartbeat. Elias slowly closed his eyes. He thought of the museum, the hall of silent mirrors, the unfinished room, the traveler's pause, the garden of enough, the countless peaceful evenings, ordinary moments, and quiet kindnesses that had gently shaped this journey. He realized something beautiful. He no longer wished to hold onto them. He trusted they would remain, not inside his memory alone, but inside the quiet way he would now walk through ordinary evenings beyond the library. He opened his eyes once more. The lantern seemed somehow brighter, not because it had changed, because his heart had become still enough to notice it. Elias looked toward him with quiet affection. I think it's time to let the evening rest. Elias nodded. I think so too. Together, they turned toward the peaceful path leading away from the courtyard. Neither looked back immediately. There was no sadness in leaving, only gratitude. After several gentle steps, Elias paused one final time. He glanced over his shoulder. The little lantern continued glowing peacefully beneath the stars, waiting, as it always would, for another traveler, for another ordinary evening, for another heart ready to discover that life's greatest treasures had never hidden themselves inside extraordinary moments, but quietly waited inside the evenings we almost forgot to notice. And somewhere beyond the warm windows of the hidden library, another doorway already stood waiting, not calling, not rushing, simply resting beneath the stars until the evening arrived, when it was time to open once again. Sleep peacefully, dream gently, and whenever your heart is ready, the hidden library will be waiting to welcome you home. As the final lantern continues glowing quietly beneath the stars, perhaps another traveler will one day find its gentle light and continue the journey once again. And perhaps, somewhere beyond this story, one ordinary evening will quietly remind you that peace has been walking beside you all along. For now, allow the hidden library to grow still once more. Let the lanterns rest. Let the pages grow quiet. And let your own heart carry only the calm you need into the night ahead. If these peaceful journeys have become a comforting part of your evenings, your gentle support helps keep the lanterns glowing for every traveler who finds their way to the hidden library. Thank you for walking beside Elias once again. Sleep peacefully, dream gently, and whenever your heart is ready, the hidden library will be waiting to welcome you home.